Hello and welcome to Mad About Sports for yet another video. And today we are going to be talking about an interesting topic. Now, often we have spoken about how important are strike rates in modern day cricket. And today's video is all about cricket and how strike rates in modern day T20 cricket is a very important factor in deciding how an innings progression matters for a team. Now, in the recent past, of course, we have been talking about template, which needs to be followed by certain teams, template, which needs to be adapted by certain batters in order to survive in a particular format. And of course, when we talk about that particular format, it has to be the T20 form of the game. Now, of course, we have to talk about who are the main players when we talk about this anchor role, right? Now, in T20 these days, one particular role which a lot of batters do not really want to adopt is the anchor role because it is generally felt that a batter who likes to adopt anchor role is not giving a positive returns for the team, primarily because of the slow start he is giving and his inability to accelerate through the middle overs. T20 game has certainly evolved since 2015, one can say so. Now people are moving to a fast-paced T20 mode where you got to have close to at least 8 out of your top 7 batters who are batting in excess of 150 strike rate. Now, why did I take 8? Now, in the last batter, could obviously there are going to be failures also in that. Now, we're talking about primarily 8 batters who can bat in excess of 150 and one batter who can bat in excess of 140 at least in order for the team to get better returns. In that in excess of 150 strike rate as well, you need to have batters who can go up to 180 to 170 as well in a particular batting order. Hence, you're seeing most successful T20 teams have always adopted batters who can strike harder. Now, let's talk about some of the most successful T20 teams. England is a fine example. Now, when you talk about the English cricket team, you have batters like Josh Butler, Alex Hales. On the other end, you have down the order, you have someone like Ben Stokes who can come in, Moeen Ali who can accelerate. Or if you talk about T20 franchises, let's talk about Chennai Super Kings in this year, for example. Now, they've got 8 batters, close to which makes Mahendra Singh Dhoni come at number 8. And that also means there's immense amount of batting depth, and they have always already gone in with the batting approach where they've told their batters to bat at a certain strike rate. Hence, you're seeing someone like Ruturaj Gaikwad in this particular season of IPL have a certain lift off in his strike rate where initially he was striking at 160 to 170 as well. Now, this is what I'm talking about when the team is batting first. It's very important to perceive a particular batter or a particular team's performance when they're batting first and batting second. Now, this imminent performance or this performance, or especially the term strike rate, comes into the picture even more when the team is batting first more than ever. Because in the second innings, you can often say you're calculating as per the run rate required. Hence, you can maybe have a plan. You can take the chase deep, then you can accelerate towards the lateral end. So that's the way you go about it, especially when you're chasing. But when you're batting first, when you're setting a total, you need to go at a certain strike rate in order to be safer. Now, in modern day cricket, why are we giving a lot of importance to batting and not about bowling? That's a question which a lot of people ask. Now, the primary reason is the pitches have become very flat. So you need to bat at a certain strike rate to even survive in these kind of conditions, these kind of pitches. So you need to be posting scores which is above par by at least 20 to 15 runs. In previous generation, previous eras, we could have spoken about how the bowling was still relevant, how bowlers could come in a good pitch and pick up wickets. But now with the flatter surfaces, shorter boundaries, and especially in day and night games where dew is a prominent factor as well, you need to be above par by a good amount of margin. Now, fine example is Royal Challengers Bangalore versus Chennai Super Kings game. Chennai Super Kings did score 226, but you always felt like Royal Challengers Bangalore could chase it down at some stage. They came very close by scoring 217. So they did score 15 runs above par in the Chinnaswamy ground. Now, why I take that example is because the ground was small, dimensions were shorter, and at the same time, the conditions were very tough for bowling. So you had to score in excess of 200, 210 in order to make that score a par. So you had to bat in a certain way in order to help your team to score a score which is above par. A normal parlance, you could have said 226 is it's a big total, but it's also important to assess the conditions and score runs which is above par in more of the occasions. And T20 cricket has gone in a way where even if you're playing in Australia or in England, the conditions don't really matter. You're going to get similar pitches, which is going to be flatter in conditions where batters have to bat in a certain way. Now let's look at a certain understanding to where if a particular batter is having slow start, can he catch up? Now you're having a batter who's batting at 100 strike rate in the first 10 to 20 balls. Can he catch up, and can you ultimately say if his strike rate goes up to 160, 170, ultimately, is that a good innings or not? Now let's look at some graphs, right? Because it's so important to understand the data what we have in hand. Now, generally, if you look at this graph, you can understand that a batter who lasted 20 deliveries on next year of that with a strike rate of 105 to 95 and 105 since 2018. You can see only have last for a batter has only gone to play 40 deliveries or more only 25% of the time. So what does that mean? In the first 20 balls, his strike rate is close to 100, and even if he has a lift off in the next 20 balls, the number of occasions in which he has survived is less than 25 percentage. Now that in itself is a glaring sign. Now you're talking about a batter. I'll give you an example of KL Rahul, because nowadays everybody's talking about KL Rahul. He's playing an anchor's role. Definitely, he's not helping the team's cause in the larger scheme of things. Now there is a point to be reckoned with. Now one school of thought certainly thinks KL Rahul has got the ability to accelerate. KL Rahul can definitely make up for the lost deliveries up front. But is it really going to happen more often than not? It is definitely not going to happen. The innings what he's going to play, more often than not, it is not a guarantee that he's going to go out there and play 40 deliveries in all of these occasions. And that's a clearing graph. As I put this graph again, now whatever he's going to play in the first 20 balls is definitely going to negatively impact the team. It has already been negatively impacted. Now let's look at the catch up over here. It's very important to look at the catch up. How many of these occasions we can see a catch up taking place? We can see the catch up in these occasions are very rare. Now the catch up is, you can say, it's close to improbable. Now more of these occasions, you can see the strike rates are definitely given there on the left hand side of the screen. You can see strike rates where on how many of these occasions the strike rates really go up. Now if a batter plays close to 50 to 60% of the balls or 70% of the balls, then when he starts to really catch up. Now how many of these occasions does it really happen that he can go up to a strike rate of close to 150 or 200 for that matter? It's very rare. Now, for example, if Virat Kohli or if KL Rahul, for that example, fails when they're facing 25 runs of 25 balls or 25 runs of 20 balls at a strike rate of 105 to 110, that failure was going to negatively impact the team in a much more dangerous way than it can actually do. If you're playing fast, if you're scoring 25 runs of 10 balls, that's definitely going to consume less percentage of the balls. So in T20 cricket, it has come to a point, it's about how many percent of the time do you actually occupy the crease. In test or in any other format, there's a common term, occupy the crease for as long as you want. But in T20, the game has shifted in such a way, it's about less consumption of your time in the crease and more impact you can create. If you can create a 15 ball 30, that's better than a 35 ball 50. Now you would say the margin of the balls are same, but no, it is not. The consumption time is different. You only consume 15 balls and your strike rate is close to 200 in that. But whereas when you're consuming 35 balls and when you score 50 runs, the consumption level of balls is much more and the strike rate is also less, because marginal difference is mighty in this. Because 35 balls have consumed, whereas you should have scored ideally at a strike rate of 200 from there on, which is 70 in that case, but you have scored 20 runs less. So that is a negative impact which I'm talking about in the modern day cricket. Now that happens especially when you're batting first. It might be a tougher pitch as well. Now talking about which, a lot of you people might be wondering, can you play a certain way in all these pitches? Not certainly. Now, for example, if you're playing in a surface like Lucknow, for example, let's take Lucknow, because this time Lucknow's pitches have come under the radar a lot more. Power scores around 130, 125. I'm giving IPL's examples because it is what is happening in these days. And a lot of you people are hooked up into IPL and the surfaces as well. In Lucknow kind of a pitch, you can still afford to play a 70 or 55 balls and you can get away, because a pitch is hard to get away with. So it's important to assess the pitch and not be reckless. At the same time, be smart, understand the pitch and go about it. If it's a flat surface, now as I spoke about Chinnaswamy, or for that matter, let it be Wankhede, for example. Now that is where it's so important to have that accelerator over there. Now I'll bring you another example as well. How many of you did watch the KKR versus the Mumbai Indians game where Venkatesh Iyer scored a beautiful 100 there, right? It looked like, oh wow, Venkatesh Iyer scored 100, but you felt at the end of the day KKR was at least 25 runs short of the power score. Exactly what I'm talking about. Venkatesh Iyer, in order to score that particular 100, he reached 90 when he was off 41 balls, and by the time he scored that 100, he consumed 9 balls. He had a considerable amount of slowdown just to get that milestone. And even on the other end, Rinku Singh was giving the strike to him. That meant overs number 14, 15, 16, in order to get to the 100, they only scored close to 15 runs over there in 3 overs, or close to 20 runs in 3 overs. That was the difference. If they would have scored 40 runs in the 3 overs, the score would have been close to 205 or 210 in the larger scheme of things. And that's what made Mumbai Indians chase down the target in 17.3 overs or odd. So that is very important to look into things. Maybe some people really do slow down for milestone. Is it really worth doing for your own good? or is it for team scores ultimately? In T20 format, it has come to a point where you are putting your team first completely, regardless of you scoring a 50 or not. If you can give that strike rate of 200 at a minimum of 15 balls, that is good enough. I think the bar to measure a strike rate of 200 should be 15 balls. 15 balls to a strike rate of 200 is always going to be better than a strike rate of 130 at a bar of 30 plus balls. So strike rate of 200 is a bar minimum right now, especially if you're batting 15 balls, and that's how you lift off. Because the moment you're going to play 100 strike rate in 15 balls, that's extremely negative impact knock. So that's where lift off needs to be considered. Let's bring another graph as well, because here we can know how many times has a batter's really survived, especially when you're talking about it. Now, this also really says final strike rate is correlated to the strike rate of first 10 to 20 deliveries, because ultimately what happens is your final strike rate is going to be determined by how you're going to really lift off as well. Now, the correlation in this as well is very similar. You can see on both the axes, the final strike rate is always going to be about how you lift off. If you have a better lift off, especially what I'm talking about is charging point, right? If you start charging at when you face 5 deliveries, and if you have a charger 200 strike rate or 180 strike rate, your finish is always going to be determined in a better way than what you are going to have in towards the latter end. So ultimately, what happens is your charging point is what determines your ending point as well. If you're going to have a charging point of 150 strike rate when you have faced 10 deliveries, and if you're going to survive, if you're going to face deliveries number 10 to 15 at a strike rate of 150, until delivery number 10 you're only striking 100, uh, the ultimate difference it's going to create is going to be very minimal. But if you're going to strike at a strike rate of 150 from the very start and end up at a better strike rate, that's going to create a lot more better value to your team as well. So this is very important, especially when you're talking about charging points and where you should really accelerate. Because in modern day T20 game, it has become extremely data heavy, that you need to consider these smaller points. Now the biggest question is, do batters keep this in mind, especially when they're batting? They definitely have to. That's where the game has come into. That's where the numbers are even more prominent. Now let's look at a very interesting stat over here. Let's talk about some of the players, and let's talk about our favorite players, because ultimately it comes down to these players and how they have gone about in the modern day game. Because these players are our heroes. Ultimately, we talk about them, we appreciate their good innings, and we also should criticize when they don't do well. So that's why we have come down to this point where we are going to analyze all the players as to how they've gone. This is stat as of 2020 to understand how things have gone. Now here you can see most batters have less than 1 in 5 innings that they were long and started slow and they had charge point. But secondly, very few batters up their strike rate above 140 when they play such innings. So here you can see you have different names. You have for example Glenn Maxwell, you have Andre Russell, and you have Virat Kohli, Mahendra Singh Dhoni, Chris Gale. So there's a common factor here. When there's about how many of these batters really get a lift off when they play such long innings. So very few batters over here, or less than, you can say close to, very few batters who have that lift off close to 150 or 140 have played such long innings. So here's where we talk about the term anchor. You can see the anchor batters, Virat Kohli, the Shreyas Iyer there. All these batters have a similar trait, which is like basically, playing slow innings, anchoring at a 120, 130 strike rate. And from there, how much do they lift up to? They lift up to 140 on very few occasions. So this is very important to determine how far they can go, especially when they're playing such knocks in a match. And this is going to definitely benefit the team. Now, when you talk about a 150 strike rate, maybe a batter might have started off at 30 of 20 balls and he might have ended up on 50 ball 85, which is very good, which is close to 150 odd strike rate. And but is it really impactful at the end of the day? On more of the occasion, batter will go on to fail. The chances of that batter succeeding is very minimal in comparison to a batter who starts off fast as well. Now, if a batter is going to start striking at a 150 from the very start, and if he's going to end up at 30 or 40, the balls consumed is not going to create a negative impact for the team. Now, that is where it is very important to adjudge a T20 anchor's role in the modern day cricket, and that is where it is very important to understand and perceive anchor's role as diminished in a very, very serious rate, and it is only for the benefit of the game. And T20 format, you don't need an anchor. Now, in this year's IPL, you've seen players like Virat Kohli show that intent. He has gone berserk in the power play to really create that impact straight up, because he really understands his limitation with spin in the recent past. And that's one of the reasons why he has slowed down in the middle phase. But again, if you look at Virat Kohli's end strike rate, from overs number 15 to 20. But the question is, is he going to survive to overs number 15, 20? If he's going to reduce his strike rate from overs number 7 to 12, and if that's going to create a negative impact, that's certainly not helping the team in larger cause. So it's very important to understand the players and understand the innings in different perspective, and that is where the vocal point, or everybody's voicing their opinion on not having anchors. Why is a Kane Williamson, a Babar Azam, or even Joe Root not really considered as good T20 players right now? Though they have got stats which back them, but have they played enough impactful knocks? Now, that is very important to be considered. Anchors have really diminished, though it might look very good when it comes to their stat. They have a great average of 40 or 45 plus, but their strike rate is very important. Now we are talking about an era where you cumulatively calculate a strike rate and average, which is called BESRA, batting strike rate, batting average, and strike rate. So if you have a cumulative average, where your strike rate will be the main point, and where your average will be the point which you add into it. Now, if you have a strike rate of close to 145, and if you have an average of close to 30, that's good enough. Now, that really means you're striking, your cumulative average is 175. Ideally, in modern day cricket, it has come up to 190 now, where you need to have a strike rate of 150 and average of 30, 25. So basically, 25 average and a strike rate of 150 really helps you. And at the same time, a strike rate of 150 and an average of 30 also really helps you. So 180 to 190 is the cutting point, especially when it comes to calculating the BESRA, and that's where you look into things very different as well. Now, that's where you're talking about, are strike rates really overrated? Strike rates are definitely not overrated in T20 game, and it's about, maybe it's not every day you're going to see batters who are going to come and back you up and save you. And T20 cricket has come in a way where you need players to go out there and show intent and take the game forward, because maybe batters have to think this is overs number 30 to 50 in a 50 over format, where we talk about batters going for the accelerating stage, where batters have to bat without losing any fear of losing any wicket. It's not often a team gets all out in T20 cricket at a very mere score. The chances and probability of it is very less. And that's one of the reasons why the teams who have played attacking brand of cricket with a little bit of batting depth, now the little bit of batting depth has always been successful. You have to always aim for scores which is above par by at least 10 to 15 runs, and that should really help them to go at a certain way as well. Because now you have power play, you can use the middle overs as well and play in attacking fashion. Because 20 overs are very few overs, and you can say 120 balls might sound very big, but ultimately, in larger scheme of things, with batting power play, with considerable amount of restrictions and favorable things in front of the batters, with flatter surfaces, the chances of a team getting all out are very less, because batters can go at 12 runs to 10 runs per over from the very set go in every T20 game, with whatever we have seen in the recent past. So guys, that's about it from us in this video. So do let us know if batting strike rates are overrated or not, or do you really reckon the game has changed a lot, that some of the anchor roles really needs to be thrown out of the team as well, because you are in an era where you need to have batters with intent and less of anchors. Not definitely talking about certain batters for sure, but we have to consider where the game has also moved in this recent past. Thank you for watching this video, and have a good time, all of you.